Good news. The wooden bracelet my great-grandma gave me on her deathbed turned out to be a pocket dimension. Then I told my boyfriend of many years about it. Bad news. He killed me for it. My ghost was trapped in the bracelet, forced to watch my ex and his new flings live it up during the apocalypse. Kevin and I grew up in the same small town, so calling us childhood sweethearts wouldn't be a stretch. Our families were in similar situations, so our parents went ahead and arranged for us to be married. When it was time for college applications, my scores were good enough for a top-tier university, while Kevin's were a few points shy of getting into a state school. Our town was poor back then. Kevin and I were the only two kids in our year who got into college, but our families combined could only afford to send one of us. What's the use of a girl getting all that education? She's just going to end up marrying our Kevin anyway. I say, let's pool our money and send Kevin to college. When he makes it big, Hannah can enjoy the good life with him. Kevin's mom came over to persuade my parents. They hesitated for a long time, but eventually agreed. When I found out what they'd decided, I cried in my room all night. The next day, I had to pretend everything was fine and go work in the fields. In the years that followed, Kevin did well for himself, I guess. He went straight through for his PhD. He spent 10 years in school, and I supported him for 10 years. The day my great-grandma passed, she took my hand and placed the bracelet she'd worn her entire life into my palm. The next day, I cut the web of my hand while working in the fields. The bracelet was stained with my blood, and in the next second, I was transported into a small, private world. I was completely bewildered. I figured Kevin, with all his education, would know what to do, so I called him right away and told him everything. After he heard, he warned me not to tell a soul, not even my parents. He told me to wait for him, that he'd be back in a few days to see me. I was naive enough to believe him. I didn't expect that after I brought him into the pocket dimension, he'd find a chance to kill me and take the bracelet for himself. After I died, my soul seemed to be trapped by the bracelet, forced to follow Kevin around. I watched him go back to the city without a care in the world, getting all lovey-dovey with his professor's daughter. Then the apocalypse hit. The zombie outbreak began. He used the bracelet to live a life of luxury, never worrying about food or supplies. He was surrounded by a string of girls who threw themselves at him, and he took them all. But despite all that, he was incredibly stingy with my parents, the people who had supported him for 10 years. He watched coldly as they struggled to survive, and in the end, they starved to death. Hate consumed me. Everything went black. When I opened my eyes again, I was looking at the weak but kind face of my great-grandma. Hannah dear, this wooden bracelet, it's been with me my whole life. Now, I'm giving it to you. Before I could even react, the weight in my hand was gone, and the sound of crying erupted around me. Was I back in the past? 10 years ago? That night, I pricked my index finger with a needle and carefully smeared the blood onto the bracelet. Sure enough, a moment later, I was standing in that same beautiful little world. Yes, this time around, I was going to take back everything I had lost. In 3 months, the entire world would be plunged into darkness for 7 days. After that, all signals would die, the zombie outbreak would begin, plants and animals would mutate, and natural disasters would become frequent. My job was to use the time I had to stockpile supplies. Right now, I had less than $100 to my name. I had just sent Kevin $300. Our family was covering $300 of his monthly expenses. It was a huge burden for us, but Kevin had long since turned his nose up at that amount. He was already cozy with his professor's daughter. I dialed Kevin's number. Hey Kevin, I need you to transfer me $20,000. Hannah, are you crazy? Where would I get that kind of money? I know you have it. If you don't send it, I'll go to your university and find your professor. After all the years my family supported you, I think 20 grand is letting you off easy. What do you need all that money for? Don't worry about it, Kevin. Enjoying city life? Your little girlfriend's name is Jessica, right? I bet she doesn't know what kind of person you really are. If I were to find her, I let the sentence hang, confident he knew exactly what I meant. Fine. 20,000 it is. After this, we're done. Send it now. I have your girlfriend's number, you know. 555-0123. It's sent. You're really something else, Hannah. With that, Kevin hung up. I looked at the new 20,000 balance in my account, completely satisfied. Lights out. Time for bed. The little world inside the wooden bracelet was vast and beautiful, but completely devoid of life. In my past life, I used to drift around admiring the scenery when I was bored. But even if I floated for 10 days and 10 nights straight, I never reached the edge of that paradise. Since my funds were limited, I decided to start by cultivating land in the pocket dimension, planting crops and raising pigs, cattle, sheep, chickens, ducks, and geese. I could even raise fish in the lake. I would achieve true food independence. But I still needed to stockpile other things, especially manufactured goods like chemicals and daily necessities. Early the next morning, I went from house to house looking for any piglets or calves for sale. By the time I was done, I had bought 3 sows, 2 boars, and a pair of young calves, 1 male and 1 female. Since they were all neighbors, they gave me a good price. I spent less than $5,000 in total. As for the chickens, ducks, and geese, I just rounded them up from around the village, one here, one there, until I had about 30. I tossed them all into my little world. For crop seeds, I bought over 20 pounds of every single variety, completely clearing out the store's inventory. The owner looked at me like I was insane. Over the next few days, when I wasn't clearing land and planting in my pocket dimension, I was out shopping. About 10 miles from our village was a cluster of small factories that produced all sorts of things. I planned to go check it out and see if there was anything I needed to stock up on. The downside of living in a small town is that every third person is a relative and every fifth is an acquaintance. The news of me buying seeds and young animals got back to my family before I even got home. I had to fib and say I was buying them for a friend in the city. I was heading to the factory district today. When I got to the edge of the village, I saw a crowd gathered around a car, so I went over to see what was going on. It was Kevin. He was looking pretty slick in a Range Rover, with a stunning girlfriend by his side. His eyes lit up when he saw me. Hannah, long time no see. Everyone in the village knew about our relationship, but with Kevin's new girlfriend right there, no one knew what to say. But of course, there was always a gossiper in the crowd. Kevin, weren't you and Hannah engaged since you were kids? We broke up a while ago. I even gave her a $20,000 breakup fee to thank her family for their support over the years. Wow, Kevin, $20,000. You've really made it big. Within half a day, the entire village knew that Kevin and I had broken up, and that he'd given me $20,000. That evening, Kevin's parents came to our house. His mother grabbed my wrist, her face beaming. Hannah, dear, I've seen everything your family has done for Kevin all these years. Just consider that $20,000 as repayment. You two can still be good friends from now on. My father's face was livid. That's easy for you to say. 20,000? We've spent way more than 20,000 on Kevin over the years. To pay for his education, Hannah gave up her own chance at college, and our whole family has worked ourselves to the bone, not taking a single day off in 10 years. Most importantly, after waiting all this time for him to finish school, Hannah is 28 years old now. Come on, let's just part on good terms. If your Hannah is 28, our Kevin is 28 too. Knowing she was in the wrong, Kevin's mom made a few more excuses and left, leaving my parents looking worried and exhausted. My mother had a difficult birth with me, and I was their only child. Years of back-breaking farm work had worn me down into a typical country girl. My face weathered beyond my years. My parents' hearts ached for me, and they felt guilty, but they still came to comfort me. Hannah, that Kevin is just a heartless bastard. Don't you waste your tears on him. Back then, your mother and I were wrong. We just kept thinking, we watched that boy grow up. We knew him inside and out. If he made it big, you'd have a good life if you married him. Sigh, who knew he'd turn out to be such an ungrateful bastard? I used to be bitter, full of hate. But now, looking at my parents' graying hair, they weren't even 50 yet, and the deep wrinkles etched into their faces, I felt a sense of release. Our generation got an education, learned new ways of thinking. But my parents' generation, many of them could barely read. They and their whole way of thinking were out of sync with the modern world. Yet they still tried their best to make their children happy in their own way. It's okay, Mom and Dad. As long as you've come to terms with it. Just put that 20,000 away. Think of it as your dowry. I will. Because of the little drama with Kevin's return, my trip to the factories was delayed by a day. The next morning, I set out early. There were no cars heading my way, so I walked for over 3 hours to get there. But after visiting a few of the factories, I knew the trip was more than worth it. The first place I went to specialized in cookware. I bought 20 large cast iron woks and a whole pile of stainless steel pots, pans, bowls, and plates. The second factory produced alcohol fuel, both small, solid pucks and large barrels of liquid. I took 100 cases of the former and 100 barrels of the latter. You couldn't expect to be using gas or electric stoves in the apocalypse. But the thought of gas stoves reminded me that I needed to get some propane tanks filled. It would make cooking much more convenient than starting a fire from scratch. And to start a fire, you need lighters. As luck would have it, the factory next door made lighters. A box of 10,000 lighters was only 3,000. With a wave of my hand, I bought 3 boxes. My mom would never have to worry about me rubbing 2 sticks together to make fire again. The factories didn't disappoint. Buying straight from the source was way cheaper. But I couldn't just openly move all this stuff into my pocket dimension. I had to rent an empty warehouse, have the factories deliver everything there, and then secretly transfer the goods from inside. The crops in my little world were growing at an incredible rate. Seeds I planted in the morning would have green sprouts by the afternoon. The livestock were also thriving, running all over the place. After my trip to the factories, I made plans to travel farther out to buy things like spices in bulk. I had to stockpile everything I needed before the apocalypse arrived, so I could just kick back and relax. I'd been so busy running around like a chicken with its head cut off that I hadn't paid any attention to what Kevin was up to. It was a neighbor who told me he and his new girlfriend had moved into the village and were planning to build a new house. TSK, that Kevin has really made it big, building a 4 or 5-story mansion just like that. Hannah, I feel so bad for you. You paid for his education and waited 10 years for him, only to have someone else reap the benefits. Pretty much everyone in the village knew my family had supported Kevin through school. The neighbor's tone was full of envy, but I just smiled and shook my head. I wish him all the best. The more smug he was now, the more pathetic he'd be in 3 months. That poor girl was clueless too. Just for a relationship, she was willing to buy her boyfriend a car and a house. Kevin must have really pulled the wool over her eyes. I bought a whole truckload of spices at a wholesale market, probably more than I could eat in a lifetime. But what can I say? I'm a hoarder. It gives me a damn sense of security. On my way back to the village, I ran into Kevin's new girlfriend, Jessica. She was wearing a white silk dress, her makeup was perfect, and she even smiled at me. You must be Hannah. Kevin's told me about you. Oh really? I had no desire to chat, but Jessica clearly wasn't going to let me go. Do you know what he says about you to me? I'm not interested, and I don't want to know. He says you're old and drab, dull and boring. That he never wanted to touch you, and that he only got close to you in the first place because you wouldn't stop pestering him to help you with your homework. Oh, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. Not a single thing she said was something I wanted to hear. I turned to leave. It would be a lie to say I didn't care, but knowing they only had a few more days to be smug, I could mostly ignore the sting. Still, what woman doesn't care about her appearance? When I got home, I dug out a mirror from the bottom of a chest and took a good, long look at myself for the first time in ages. My complexion was sallow, my skin rough. I really didn't look like I was in my 20s. I looked more like a haggard woman in her 30s or 40s. Was I always this old looking? No, it was from years and years of intense physical labor. To scrape together the money for Kevin's tuition and living expenses each year, I never even bought the cheapest skincare products. When my hands and feet would crack in the winter, I'd just rub some canola oil on them and wrap the cracks in strips of cloth. Now he'd latched onto a rich man's daughter and made something of himself. But for a poor country kid like me, I never had the chance to change my fate through education. To make money, the only way was to sacrifice my health and my youth. My life wasn't even that hard. My parents' generation had it much worse. It's just that the marks of all my hard work had become a joke in other people's eyes. And that pissed me off. When I'm pissed off, Kevin pays. In the middle of the night, when everyone was asleep, I snuck over to Kevin's house and made off with that car they said was worth over 100 grand. There were no security cameras in a village like this. I grabbed it and left, the whole thing smooth as silk. Looking at the car sitting quietly in my little world, I thought to myself, I need to find a chance to get the keys. The theft of Kevin's car became the hottest topic in the village. He even suspected me, but with no proof, he had to let it go. I happened to overhear Jessica comforting him. It's okay. When I go back home, I'll just have my dad buy me another one. Oh, Jessica, you're so good to me. Of course. We're a couple, aren't we? As soon as the house is finished, we'll get married. Married as soon as the house is finished. Hard to comment on that. I guess I wish them all the best. Before I knew it, almost 2 months had passed. I'd already harvested 2 rounds of vegetables from my little world. If I'd known the crops in here grew this fast, I definitely wouldn't have planted so much so soon. I fell into deep thought, staring at the small mountain of produce I'd harvested. I could never eat all of this myself. Should I sell it? But I was hesitant. The fruits and vegetables were just so vibrant and perfect. And after tasting them once, I was even more reluctant to sell. The flavor was out of this world. I don't know if anyone else has noticed this over the years, but fruits and vegetables just don't taste like they used to. They've lost their essence, or to put it more poetically, their soul. But the crops grown in my little world had their souls completely intact, maybe even more so. And I don't know if it was just my imagination, but after eating them, I felt full of energy and vitality. My parents felt the same way after eating them too, so there was definitely something special about them. We had to eat more of this good stuff. The produce harvested from the little world was still fresh after a week, which led me to a bold theory. Sure enough, 2 weeks passed, and the pile of fruits and vegetables looked exactly the same as it did a fortnight ago. Not only that, but my parents' complexions had become rosy, and their graying hair was now mostly black again. I picked up the dusty mirror again, and saw that my own skin had become much fairer and smoother. Who wouldn't be happy about getting prettier? During this time, I had bought almost everything I needed, spending every last cent of the 20,000. Barring any accidents, I didn't plan to live in the little world long term, but I would move my parents in there. I had learned my lesson with Kevin about trusting the wrong people with a secret like this. And my parents had spent their entire lives as farmers, their faces to the dirt. It was time for them to relax and enjoy life. But for some reason, no matter how many times I tried, I couldn't bring my parents into the pocket dimension. It seemed that this time, only I could enter this world. With that in mind, during the last 2 weeks, I found the air raid shelter I had stumbled upon in my past life. One of Kevin's flings at the time had told him about it. The shelter was hidden in a very secluded spot, and she had only found it by chance while running from zombies. Well, this time around, it's all mine. The place was definitely remote, and the entrance was very well hidden. I only remembered the general area from my past life, and it took me 3 or 4 days to find it this time. It was quite spacious inside, and the ventilation was fine, but it was very dusty. I bought some cement and bricks, brought my parents over, and the 3 of us spent a day sealing up the entrance, leaving only a small opening for one person to get through. I didn't install a door because we didn't have enough savings left to buy a heavy-duty security door. But I had a giant boulder in my little world. Once we were inside, I could just place the boulder in front of the opening to block it. That was way more reliable than any security door. As for all the strange things suddenly appearing, I explained it all by saying I had a space-based power. In my past life, a small number of humans had awakened all sorts of powers during the apocalypse, including support-type space abilities. My parents hadn't awakened any powers back then, though, or they wouldn't have starved to death. Just thinking about it made me angry. That night, I went and cleaned out Kevin's granary. This time, I just broke down the door, spent less than a minute sucking all the rice into my little world, and then took off. I was long gone by the time I heard the sounds of Kevin's family cursing. It wasn't that I needed the rice, I'd already cultivated 3 acres of farmland in my little world. I just couldn't swallow my pride. As my appearance grew younger, my strength also increased. 3 acres was nothing I could handle 10 with no problem. My parents and I sat quietly in the air raid shelter, waiting for the darkness to fall. They were still a little skeptical, but when the world outside went pitch black in the middle of the day, they finally believed me. "Hannah, what's this apocalypse going to be like?" my mother asked nervously, squeezing my hand tightly. "Well, most of the plants and animals will mutate. A random flower on the side of the road could eat you. Some people, like me, will be able to make things appear out of thin air. We're called the powered. And some people, they won't make it, and they'll turn into zombies." "Zombies? Don't they drink people's blood? Worse, they eat your flesh." My mother shuddered at my words. "Good heavens, what are we going to do? Your father and I are just a couple of old folks. We can't help you much." "Don't worry about that. Just get ready to enjoy life. Your daughter's got this." I pulled out a bunch of ingredients. "Mom, Dad, we're having hot pot tonight." The livestock in the little world grew much faster than on the outside. I had even gone to other villages to buy more and was lucky enough to find a pregnant sow. Now I had at least a few dozen pigs, cattle, and sheep. The ingredients wouldn't spoil anyway. Beef used to be expensive, but tonight I slaughtered a whole cow. We had more than enough. After a steaming hot pot meal, my parents were much calmer. "This beef is so fresh and tender. It must have been very expensive." "Not at all. It was all homegrown, a $0 purchase." After dinner, we all lay down on our beds with full bellies. As I was drifting off, I felt my head getting a little hot. My mother's voice came from beside me. "Hannah, are you feeling a little unwell? What's wrong? Don't you feel well?" I sat up immediately, but the sudden movement made me dizzy, and my vision went black for a moment. Ever since I started eating the food from the little world, I'd been full of energy. This hadn't happened in a long time. "I feel like I have a bit of a fever." I reached out and felt my parents' foreheads. They were burning up. Then I felt my own just as hot. I took out a thermometer and checked. Sure enough, all three of us were running a temperature of nearly 104 Fahrenheit. This didn't happen in my last life. Could we be awakening our powers? At that thought, I stumbled to the entrance, my head spinning, and checked the boulder. Good, it was sealed tight. I checked the vents. Working normally. After checking everything, I lay back down and reassured my mother. "You're probably just about to get your powers. Just get a good night's sleep and you'll wake up as superheroes." Who didn't fantasize as a kid about having superpowers, like controlling the wind and rain or moving things with your mind? Hearing my words, my parents' tense expressions visibly relaxed. "That's good. Your mother and I were worried we'd just be a burden to you. Now we can actually help you out." I don't know how much time passed. I looked at my watch. It was already noon the next day. I felt refreshed and clear-headed. The heaviness from yesterday was gone, replaced by a feeling of immense strength. My parents were awake too, and they asked excitedly, "Hannah, quick, help us see what powers we got." I guided them through the process I'd heard about in my past life. One had fire, the other had water. Pretty good. From now on, one could start the fire and the other could boil the water. A husband and wife team makes the work go faster. Once they got the hang of it, my parents started excitedly experimenting with their powers off to the side, one moment conjuring a small flame, the next a splash of water. They were almost 100 years old combined, but they were playing like two little kids. I focused my own power at my fingertips, forming a small ice crystal. So I had a mutated water ability ice. This power was awesome. Ice drinks, ice cream, smoothies. After the apocalypse began, extreme weather became the norm. Intense cold, scorching heat, droughts, and floods were all common. To survive the apocalypse, powers were crucial. These abilities could be leveled up through combat with zombies or mutated creatures. Of course, you could also level up by using the crystal cores found in zombies' brains. That was a shortcut, but it wasn't one I recommended or would ever use myself. I had seen countless people's powers go haywire and cause them to explode while leveling up. No one knew what caused the violent reactions, but my gut told me the problem was the crystal cores. The first day the world saw light again, I took my fully armed parents out to hunt zombies. They were carrying large machetes used for chopping firewood, while I was empty-handed. I planned to fight with my powers. Human civilization was built on technology. When the Earth's magnetic field went haywire, cutting off signals and electricity, the only thing humans could rely on was their own strength. There weren't many zombies in the village, the real hordes were in the cities. Mutated plants and animals were also a huge threat to human survival, but at the beginning of the apocalypse, they weren't strong enough yet. They kept their distance from humans, maintaining a delicate balance. By the time we reached the village, every house was shuttered. Only lone zombies wandered the streets. Many of them were familiar faces, but they had no consciousness left, only drooling and snarling as they lunged at us. I formed an ice spike and shot it straight through a zombie's eye, piercing out the back of its head. "Hey, isn't that the miller's youngest son? So young." My parents' voices were filled with sorrowful regret. I immediately said, "Mom, Dad, these are zombies. They want to drink our blood and eat our flesh. You can't go soft on them." "Don't worry, we're not clueless." With that, they both raised their machetes and started looking for targets. The three of us swept through the village for over an hour until my energy was completely drained. During that time, my parents learned to coordinate their powers, their movements becoming more and more fluid. Just as we finished off the last zombie in sight, Mrs. Miller, the village widow, ran out from around a corner. Seeing her son lying lifeless on the ground, she screamed at us in grief and rage. You're murderers." "Mrs. Miller, look closely. Your son was already a zombie." To make sure the older generation understood, I always referred to them as zombies. But Mrs. Miller wouldn't listen. She charged straight at us, looking like she wanted to take us down with her. The commotion drew out other villagers. They probably didn't grasp the concept of zombies, yet they just thought these people were poisoned or sick. In their eyes, our family had brutally slaughtered them. We were killers, executioners. Arrest the Smiths. Take them to the police. Someone in the crowd shouted, and suddenly everyone was closing in on us. In the distance, I saw Kevin with his arm around Jessica, a smug look on his face as he watched the show. No wonder that voice sounded familiar. It was him. There was no point in trying to reason with this mob. We had to run. I grabbed my parents and ran for the edge of the village, making another mental note against Kevin. Speaking of which, I still hadn't gotten those car keys, had I? Instead of stressing myself out, I might as well drive Kevin crazy. Like I always say, there's no need to be a completely sane person. In the middle of the night, I wandered around outside, attracting zombies. Once I had a small group following me, I led them toward Kevin's house. God is my witness, I really wasn't trying to hurt anyone. What harm could a poor old woman like me possibly do? The zombies at the beginning of the apocalypse were slow and weak. Anyone with a bit of strength could take out a whole group with a hoe. If Kevin actually got killed by these newbies, it would only prove how pathetic he was. When I reached Kevin's yard, I hopped over his wall. While the zombies were clawing and snarling at the wall outside, I found a good hiding spot. The zombies' stupidity had its advantages. Right now they could smell me, so they were focused on scratching at the wall. They might have been slow, but they were strong, and their claws were tough. If they kept at it until morning, they might just claw a hole right through. I saw Kevin poke his head out of a window, then flinch back in terror at the scene below. Outside it's all zombies. So he did know what these things were. I thought he might not. Kevin's parents also came to look, and the whole family started pacing frantically by the window. With more people came the scent of fresh meat, which spurred the zombies outside to claw at the wall with even more fervor. The wall's collapse was imminent. Kevin's front gate wasn't sturdy, it was just a wooden door. A few years ago, it was because they didn't have the money to replace it. Or maybe they did have the money, but since my family was still struggling to support Kevin's education, they couldn't exactly flaunt their wealth. In any case, once the wall came down, that gate would be useless. It wouldn't last 3 minutes against the zombies. You'd better think of something fast, Kevin. I'm still waiting to come steal your keys. That night, I got the keys without a hitch. After the gate broke, the whole family scrambled over to their new house. The main frame of their new building was already up, and they'd chosen an impressive security door. It looked a lot sturdier than the old house. Was I going to let him live peacefully in such a nice, unfinished house? Of course not. Since they hadn't installed security bars on the windows yet, I went around and smashed every pane of glass on the first floor. Then I took an axe to the front door lock and broke it. Don't thank me, Kevin. It's the least I could do. I was in a fantastic mood, humming a tune as I walked back to the shelter in the morning light. But as I passed through a dense part of the woods, I smelled the strong scent of blood and had a bad feeling. Sure enough, before I could react, a small dagger was pressed against my neck. Easy there, friend. We can talk about this. Food. No problem. My family and I live in an air raid shelter just up ahead. We have food there. Lead the way, he said, pressing the dagger a little deeper into my skin. The blade was right over my carotid artery. This guy's a pro. My guard went up even higher. A dangerous person. Can't let him live. I secretly started forming an icicle in my palm, preparing to plunge it into his temple when he wasn't looking. But before I could make my move, he slumped against my back and collapsed. I pushed him to the ground and finally got a clear look at him. He was soaked in blood, and his exposed wounds were deep enough to see bone. I had no idea what this guy had been through to end up in such a state. Still, to be so badly injured and try to threaten someone instead of asking for help serves him right if he dies. I wasn't planning on saving him, but I only looked at him for a moment, and I couldn't forget his face. He was so handsome. I'm not a saint, but I have a weakness for a pretty face. If a tool like Kevin could have a whole harem in the apocalypse, what's wrong with me keeping one hot guy around? What's wrong with that? I dragged the man back to the air raid shelter. He had a surprisingly strong will to live, and the bleeding had stopped. My parents are simple farmers. Seeing me bring back an injured man, they didn't say a word. They just went out to gather medicinal herbs and applied them to his wounds. My mother even stitched up his largest wounds with a sterilized needle and thread. He woke up a few times in the middle of it, mostly delirious, but he was always eager to eat. He could put away 3 large bowls in one sitting. If I nurse him back to health, maybe by next spring, I'll have a boyfriend. What if he says no? Then he says no. At least I'll save 9 bowls of rice a day. His recovery was astonishing. In just a week, he was already able to walk around. My name is Alex. Hannah. About before, I'm sorry. It's fine. I figured he was talking about threatening me with the dagger. I'd already forgotten about it after all. I'd almost killed him too. After that, we started going out to fight zombies together, sometimes hunting mutated animals in the mountains. His power was lightning. I once joked and asked if he could control the current to exactly 1 amp, so I could charge my phone. I didn't expect him to actually spend 3 days figuring it out, but he really did manage to fully charge my phone. The cost was that his power was completely drained. I found out later that he had just sat there, foolishly, holding the phone charger for an hour to get it fully charged. Life in the apocalypse was, surprisingly, much better than it had been before. The space was overflowing with more food than we could ever eat, and our family's powers were all steadily improving. Alex and I were now at level 4, and my parents were at level 2 with signs of an impending upgrade. Life was good, but it lacked a certain challenge. Our location was remote, so there were hardly any zombies, and the mutated animals in the mountains had grown familiar with mine and Alex's since they stayed far away whenever they sensed us. I didn't mind the comfortable life. The comfort zone had dulled my fighting spirit, making me just want to chill here forever. But the sudden appearance of a level 5 zombie shattered our peaceful existence. Until now, the strongest zombie I had ever seen was level 4, and that was when we went to the county seat last time. I never expected a level 5 to appear so quickly. The difference between level 4 and level 5 was like a chasm. Alex and I used to think we could fight above our level, but the appearance of the level 5 zombie shattered our arrogance. My full power attack barely managed to tear off a small piece of its flesh. In a life or death moment, Alex used all his strength to hold the zombie back, yelling at me, "I can't hold it for long. Run." I bit my lip hard. I didn't run. Instead, I ran towards Alex. Are you crazy? No, I wasn't crazy. I was perfectly clear-headed. The moment I grabbed Alex's wrist, I prayed frantically in my mind, "Come on, little world. Do me a solid and let us both in." I actually really like him. Thankfully, my prayer worked. The next moment, he and I fell onto the soft grass of the pocket dimension. Where are we? That's for me to know and you to find out. Okay. Alex clearly hadn't recovered yet, his large hand still clutching mine tightly. You. I wiggled my hand, and his handsome face turned red as he immediately let go. Sigh. I actually didn't want to let go. Alex was such a slow burn after all this time together. This was the first time we'd held hands. But there were more important things to do. I had to take advantage of the zombie's absence to get back to the shelter and bring my parents here. After successfully rescuing my parents, Alex and I decided to head to the center of City A. It was the only way to quickly increase our power. In the dog-eat-dog world of the apocalypse, staying put was a slow suicide. I didn't want to just chill in the pocket dimension forever. I couldn't bring myself to entrust my life to a wooden bracelet. My fate would always be in my own hands. The city center was teeming with zombies. Most were level 3, with very few level 2s. Level 4s were rare, but we'd encountered them. As for level 5, I'd only seen one that one time and never again. On our way today, we rescued a young girl. She was so young. Yet when she was surrounded by a horde of zombies, all she could do was cry. I honestly have no idea how she survived this long. It turned out she was a healer and had come out with a team. So she was a support class. Healing abilities were pretty rare. But her courage definitely needed some work. Ma'am, can you take me back to my base? Please, please. The girl looked up at me with big, teary eyes, tugging pitifully at the corner of my shirt. I wanted to say no, but she called me ma'am, with such respect. All right, fine. I just need to get you to the entrance of the base, right? Yes. Thank you, ma'am. You're the best. She threw her arms around me in a hug and stood on her tiptoes to give me a peck on the cheek. Ha, the girl was soft and cuddly. I wasn't offended. But Alex was over in the corner, scowling like someone owed him $1 million. The girl was still a kid at heart. When we stopped for a break, she leaned against me and said plaintively, "Ma'am, that guy is so mean. Does he not like me?" I shot a glare at Alex. Stop scaring the poor girl. Alex didn't say anything, but when no one was looking, he secretly tugged on the corner of my shirt too, leaning in to whisper in my ear, "Don't you be mean to me." The cool, clean scent that was uniquely Alex filled my senses. My face flushed, and I was at a loss for words. That damn Alex. Why was he copying the way the kid talks? The base wasn't close to the city. Once we were out of the urban area and the roads cleared up, I took out the car I'd stolen from Kevin, and we drove the rest of the way. It took about 2 more hours to reach the base the girl had told us about. The entrance was fortified with towering earthen walls, likely the work of someone with an earth-based power. The girl's name was Lily Sullivan. She stood at the entrance, enthusiastically inviting us to take a tour of the base. Our base has the best facilities, I'd say. We have a pedestrian street inside that sells all sorts of weird and interesting things. And lots of beautiful clothes, all super cheap. "Ma'am, you have such a great figure. Let me buy you a few dresses." I had to admit, Lily was making a compelling case. I turned to ask Alex for his opinion. "I'm good with whatever." "Then let's go check it out." Lily cheered and eagerly looped her arm through mine. She must have been pretty important in the base. The guards at the gate knew we were her friends, so there was no fee and no complicated inspection. We were inside in minutes. It was the first time I'd seen so many people since the apocalypse began. The ratio of powered people to regular people in our base is 1 to 1,000, but there's no discrimination against regular people. The powered are responsible for going out to gather supplies and clear zombies, while the regular people handle the daily operations of the base. Lily chattered away beside me as I walked quietly along. Suddenly, my wrist was grabbed. I looked up and saw a familiar face. But this face was now weathered and worn, only vaguely resembling its former self. I glanced down at his empty left pant leg. Knowing he wasn't doing well put my mind at ease. "Hannah, it's really you. You remember me, right? It's Kevin." "Kevin. Long time no see," I said, my voice flat. Alex beat me to it, slapping Kevin's hand away. "Who is he?" Kevin's voice was sharp. Before I could get the word friend out, Alex cut in. "Her boyfriend. So from now on, keep your hands off my girlfriend. If I see it happen again, I'll break your wrist." Ha! I had finally landed Alex, even if it was under these strange circumstances. Hannah, after 10 years together, have you fallen out of love so quickly? Kevin asked, a wounded look on his face. All I could think was, what a thick-skinned bastard. Are you nuts? Are you trying to cause trouble between me and my boyfriend? With that, I tossed my head and pulled Alex away. As for getting revenge on Kevin, seeing him so down and out, the former golden boy now struggling at the bottom of society, that was more satisfying to me than just killing him. Still, I made a point to casually mention to Lily that I didn't like the guy. As for the rest, I trusted she'd know what to do. Alex was silent the whole way, his face a blank mask. I felt a little anxious. Was he angry about what happened? I could explain really, but I'd have to wait until we were alone. At my age, I'd never been in a proper relationship, and I was too embarrassed to have that conversation in public. The street Lily recommended was filled with all sorts of strange and wonderful things. I was overwhelmed with choices. Clothes for sale. This batch is all high-end stuff from the mall. Brand new, cheap price, negotiable. The guy was yelling at the top of his lungs, but the clothing stalls were pretty dead. It made sense. When you can't even get enough to eat, who's thinking about pretty clothes? But as it happened, I was someone with more food than I knew what to do with. I stopped at the stall and casually browsed. The styles were nice and they had my size. Hey boss, how much for the clothes? Miss, you name your price. Most transactions now were bartering. I thought for a moment. Lately, the piles of potatoes and sweet potatoes in my space had grown into small mountains. I took out 10 pounds of sweet potatoes and 10 pounds of potatoes. How much can I get for these? The stall owner was probably not expecting such a generous offer. He froze. All of this for me? Of course. Why else would I take it out? Lily quickly chimed in. Ma'am, that's enough to buy his entire stall. I wasn't interested in every single item, so I picked out about a dozen pieces. The owner kept his eyes glued to the potatoes and sweet potatoes, trying his best to sell me more clothes. No thanks, this is enough. The owner was clearly disappointed this was less than an eighth of his stock. But since he'd been so eager, I waved my hand magnanimously. You can have it all. No need for change. Thank you, miss. I turned and walked away with a swagger. So, is this what it feels like to be rich? The other stall owners on the street saw how generous I was and started shouting at me, trying to get my attention. Miss, look over here. Jade bracelets, pendants, earrings, we have it all. Miss, don't believe him. Everything at his stall is fake. You should check out mine, pure silver hairpins, all handmade. By the time I'd walked the whole street, my eyes were glazed over, and of course, I'd bought a ton of stuff. When I found Alex, he was at a stall buying something. I couldn't tell what it was covered with a black cloth. Good eye, son. These are the latest models. One price, 5 pounds of rice. When he saw me, his face turned inexplicably red. You want it? Yeah. Sold. I handed 5 pounds of rice to the owner, who in turn gave me a large black bag. What's in it? I was curious and tried to open it, but Alex snatched it away before I could. Fine, don't show me. I still remembered how he'd gotten upset when Kevin was talking nonsense earlier. I'll let him have this one. We were done playing around, so we said goodbye to Lily and drove back towards the city. That evening, I was thinking about having a nice meal, and was about to take Alex's hand to go into the little world. He took my hand first. The warmth of his skin sent a jolt through my fingertips, and my heart started to race for no reason. Do you want to know what I bought today? My cheeks burned, and I shook my head. Alex suddenly moved closer, wrapping his arms around my waist. He bent down slightly and buried his face in the crook of my neck. The warmth of his breath tickled my skin. He had always been so gentle and reserved with me, but today it was like he was a different person. He pulled me into a tight embrace, his hot breath brushing against my ear as he spoke, his tone dominant and forceful. That guy we met today, was he your ex? Just the thought of you having been with him drives me crazy with jealousy. Hannah, how are you going to comfort me? I'd never been in a situation like this before. I was so dizzy I couldn't even speak. Alex folded down the back seats of the car. I lay down nervously as he took off his shirt and braced his hands on either side of my head. His toned muscles were covered in scars of all sizes, which surprisingly, gave him a wild magnetic charm. I reached out and traced a line from his collarbone down to his abs. Alex captured my restless hands and held them above my head. His movements were dominant, but his kiss was incredibly gentle and long, and I felt like I was melting in the heat of it. In the morning, I opened my eyes and rubbed my sore back. I didn't see Alex anywhere, and my mood immediately soured. Jerk. Hit it and quit it. You're awake? Alex opened the car door. Humph. I made you some chicken noodle soup. Get up and try it. All right, fine. For the sake of the soup, the little bit of unhappiness from a moment ago vanished completely. After weeks of hard work, we had finally reached the threshold of level 5. From what I knew based on Lily's base, most of the powered were level 2 or 3, and almost all of them had used crystal cores. But the zombies were still leveling up much faster than humans. As soon as we hit level 5, we immediately went back to the air raid shelter to look for that zombie from before. Perhaps sensing intruders in its territory, the zombie appeared before we had to search for long. It remembered the 2 opponents it had easily defeated, but this time, the outcome was clearly reversed. I held the colorful level 5 crystal core in my hand and tossed it into the little world. Even though I didn't need the cores, my little world could, surprisingly, devour their energy. Over the past few weeks, every crystal core we had collected had been fed to the pocket dimension. I hadn't originally planned to stop people from absorbing the power of the cores. It was like an addiction. Once someone has tried a shortcut, it's almost impossible for them to truly give it up. But the overall strength of the powered in the human bases was generally low. If they encountered a single overwhelmingly powerful zombie, an entire base could be at risk of being wiped out. Those bases were the hope for the continuation of the human race. For that reason, I went to find Lily and told her my thoughts. Alex and I might not have much influence, but there would always be a small group of people who would listen. That's why we decided to publicize the dangers of the crystal cores. As it turned out, the head of the base, a man named Mr. Sullivan, was Lily's father. It seemed I had really saved the right person last time. Is what you two said true? Mr. Sullivan asked. There must be people in the base who have died from their powers going haywire during an upgrade. The higher the level, the greater the risk of explosion. If this continues, humanity's overall strength will remain low, and will be completely suppressed by the zombies. The consequences of that were obvious. Mr. Sullivan's expression was grave. He was a true leader, decisive and willing to trust his people. He acted with lightning speed and authority. First, he announced the dangers of the crystal cores. Then he initiated a core destruction plan. In less than 3 days, a mountain of confiscated cores had been collected in the base. In the 10th year of the apocalypse, most of the zombies had been cleared out. Mutated plants, animals, and humans each occupied their own territories. The gears of human civilization, which had been stalled for a decade, began to turn again. And me? I was on a beach, kicking my feet up and sunbathing. Mommy, I'll put sunscreen on you. Thanks, my sweet baby. I pinched the soft flesh of my son's cheek. The next second, Alex lifted him up and set him aside. Go play over there. Is this a job for you?